All right, we'll get the meeting resumed here. Thanks for everybody for sticking around, and thanks to Mitch for his work with his presentation, and Sarah earlier. I forgot to mention that as well, so thank you, Sarah. Now it's Mr. Latour that's in the hot seat. So we will start with building maintenance.
Right, so building maintenance is actually a new area we've built for 2021. You see there was nothing in the 2020 budget. What these line items were interspersed amongst all the other departments for their facilities, repairs and etc. We thought it would be much more efficient to give building maintenance their own budget so that then they could plan the maintenance of all the buildings within the town without having to worry about it affecting someone else's budget. They can then now use this budget for their own plans. So these amounts are actually amounts that have been removed from all the other budgets as that you've been seeing. There's been little amounts been removed from materials, goods, supplies and contracted services. It's just a quick, just a plain switch into this area.
Okay. Councillor Sorensen.
Through the chair to administration, does that mean there's one person responsible for this budget, or is there multiple managers?
Through the chair to Councillor Sorensen, no, it's under Mr. Latour's area, and there is a person in charge of that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Moving on to my favorite topic, policing, and I think we have Constable Dave oh, geez. Go ahead.
Through the chair to administration. So on building maintenance, so this isn't anything that ties into our asset management plan with building maintenance. It's just like regular day-to-day type maintenance.
Yeah, thank you. So our building maintenance program is still evolving, and this is another step in that evolution. I think we certainly envision that eventually, we already envision the building maintenance staff as being considerate of the asset management piece, and that budgetary implications will be reflected of this as we continue to go forward and build that in there. At the current stage, we're trying to consolidate operational costs under one budgetary umbrella, better planning, better, more efficient use of resources, better project planning, etc., which will hopefully improve the general condition of our assets, which is obviously a good thing in the asset management sense.
Anybody else? All right.
Policing.
My favorite part, policing, and I know we have Constable McKenna watching online, so he's very interested in the policing budget. So there, I gave you a shout out, Dave. You're like the only person watching, I'm sure. So.
Right, so with policing. Notice the fine revenues. They're reflective of the analysis of current trends. So while there was some removed in the non-COVID, we've been able to put a bit back into the budget adjustment just based on what's happening currently. The contracted service is, you can see like those, they're very similar amounts. Again, when the fines go down or up, there's a corresponding cost that we pay out to our contractor that goes up and down as well. So that's what those are reflected there. The what's listed as purchases from other governments is our policing contract that we pay the federal government for. We've actually dropped that by 150. We had it at 2.4 for a number of years. Looking back over the last 4 to 5 years, we've never really reached that cost per year, even in some of the higher years. So we felt confident to be able to actually reduce that a little bit as well.
All right. Councillor Beyer.
Through the chair to administration, when you talk about the contracted services and I believe the fines with the photo radar, does the current trend better reflect what things were a few years ago?
Yeah, I think we would describe through the chair a normalized return to enforcement activity in regards to photo laser and other enforcement programs.
All right, any other questions? Councillor Chenard?
Just on the fine stuff, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm not mistaken, if the RCMP writes a ticket in your town limits, do we not get a percentage? Isn't that,
Yep.
how does that work?
We
So
do.
how does that reflect on the fines? Because everyone always brings up photo radar, and I know there's a percentage of other tickets, I just don't know what it is. Is that also included in there?
All of the fine revenue is encapsulated in that line item.
Okay. I just wanted clarification, because I don't know what the.
I think
jurisdiction
everything
is.
except on the highway. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So just with the budget adjustments there, does that line item reflect the annual increased costs for the RCMP contracts? I know that they indicated to us a few years ago that there'll be price escalations due to union agreements, equipment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if we're at full capacity as well as for constables, I know our rent increases as well because we're renting out of a federal building. So are you fairly confident that we're not going to have an issue of being over budget on that line item?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think those are all relevant pieces and relevant concerns. I think it's certainly, we will see implications that come through based on some of those items. It's really difficult to know exactly what those impacts will be at this stage and how they might impact the budget. And so this reflects more of a historical trend rather than that forward-facing piece. But we are certainly aware of the potential for those adjustments to come through and have an impact. I would suggest that this is an item that I would recommend be discussed at strategic planning in the upcoming spring for a couple of reasons. One being those items. Perhaps we can ask Staff Sergeant Delisle, who we will invite to attend, who we will invite to attend to update us on those items. The other piece to this that we are still unsure of in terms of how we might approach that is how the adjustments at the provincial level for additional policing resources in rural communities may impact the complement of officers here and how we might want to respond to that by potentially decreasing or changing our policing model to reflect those changing realities as well. And so with those things in mind, we felt it was best to kind of reflect what we would describe as a status quo and then leave major alterations until we could have a kind of a big picture conversation about the policing implications in our community.
So I do know that Yellowwood County, they've done some funding for enhanced policing in their jurisdiction where they pay the current complement of officers overtime to do special projects like on long weekends and stuff for increased enforcement. I think from a town perspective, I'd be very open to that as well, that if there is a focus that the town would like to see, whether that be, the 6th Ave, 50th Street issue with stop signs, or we have issues with petty crime in some neighborhoods, where we would have a budget line where they could do some special projects over and above their regular patrol shifts to address some of those issues. And I think that might actually be a more effective way of dealing with crime than necessarily increasing the complement of officers, because once you increase the complement of officers, now you have increased costs with rent, equipment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I leave that with you to discuss with the staff sergeant, but I thought that was a really great thing that the county was doing in order to get some additional policing in their jurisdiction, and I think we have some opportunity there with the amount of officers that we have, from the general duty guys to the people that are working upstairs. So, Councillor Sorensen.
Through the chair to council, I would agree with the mayor's comments, especially for if we know, for instance, that we're going to be over budget for a particular year, use that money for special projects, or we have we have a vacancy that hasn't been filled, take that money and put it towards those kind of projects. So
Thank you through the chair to Councillor Sorensen and council. Yeah, certainly we're open to ideas for how we can ensure most effective use of our resources, both the human capital, the officers that we have, as well as the financial resources. I might also suggest that one of the reasons that we're building a public safety initiative is to do project-based programs that will address and enhance public safety. And so from time to time, there may be an opportunity to allocate $10,000 from the public safety initiative to a particular issue, and allow the RCMP to really focus on something that may be a way to also address that.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Councillor Byer?
Oh, no.
No? Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Don't get whistled at again. I'm not used to getting whistled at, so. We'll move on then.
When you had the other name tag, you could
Oh,
get
yeah.
used to it.
Fire.
Very little change for fire between the two years. There's not really a lot to more to say there, unless there's any questions.
Seems like a burning topic. Weak sauce, I know.
Just on fire today, aren't you?
All right. Disaster.
Really the change you see here is we've added $50,000 to the disaster budget for coverage of direct costs for COVID. That may continue on into the new year.
Councillor Sorensen.
Through the chair to administration, so this direct cost like PPE?
Sorry, yes, like PPE, hand sanitizer, those additional costs that we're having to deal with COVID, yes.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns? I see there is a disaster, what's the word I'm looking for? Geez, lost my train of thought here. A disaster plan exercise this year. Is that legislated? What's that going to entail? Is that administration only, or is that a council thing involved with that as well? Because I would suggest that if council's involved with that, you should wait until after the municipal election.
Thank you, through the chair. I'll make a comment, and if Guy has anything to add there. We typically engage in at least one disaster-related training exercise annually. We try to change the focus from year to year to touch on different parts of our disaster response. 1 year operating a reception center, 1 year the ECC operation, and so on and so forth. I do like the idea of including council at a future one. I do think that would be best served for the year after the election, but we do an exercise each year to make sure that we are prepared and appropriately staffed for potential issues that may arise. Guy, anything to add to that?
Because we are required every year to do some kind of training, and then I think it's every 3 years that we're required to do a full scenario. And so we can adjust those every year on how we feel best. And obviously at some point, yes, it'd be a great opportunity to have one of those where councils participating.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further. We'll move on to 911.
Really, there was just a change from in 2020. There was the upgrades to the 911 centre. That was an item that was completed by the county, so it won't be carrying over to 2021. So that's just been removed from the budget.
Councillor Byer.
Through the chair to administration, regarding the upgrades that were completed, are there any increased service levels that came with that?
I have to refer that to either Mr. Derrick or Mr. Montour.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not aware of any specific enhancements other than obviously improved, modernized technology in terms of resiliency and effectiveness, but I do not believe there was a substantive change in the actual operational elements associated with that. But Guy, I'm not sure if you're familiar beyond that.
Through the chair to Councillor Byers, for the most part, it's just upgrading the technology, but with some of the software that they're upgrading with the technology, there will be some efficiencies that the center will be able to work a little better. I don't think back end with, where anybody would be able to see those efficiencies themselves, yeah.
Councillor Meyer?
Through the chair to administration, I'm not sure if I'm confusing this with another thing related to 911. Was this something that if someone is calling 911 from a cell phone and they get disconnected, they can still locate the person, or if they're having trouble with location services of finding people, they can track it? Is that a part of the technology
Yes.
that was there?
Yeah, that was one of the, because this was all legislated requirements, and that was one of the things that the technology does, is it will allow for better tracking via cell phone.
Right, okay.
Councillor Wilkinson?
To the mayor, with that change for the big cities and their dispatch, is that
No,
sort of,
it's-
that's nothing connected
we've-
to any smaller municipalities?
No, because they were the only municipalities that still had paramedic dispatch out of their dispatch centers, and we haven't done that for years here.
So we're just all right even
Yeah.
with that
Yeah.
rate, I think. Okay, thank you.
And I know at the time when that was a concern when our because we used to do everything out of Yellowwood County, and Edson, I remember the paramedics at the time said, the provincial system is a way better system because of how ambulances are. So they can actually put the closest ambulance
Right.
to the scene, not, there's a Hinton one going through, so they don't get to pick up an Edson call, that sort of thing, so. And I haven't heard any rumblings of any delayed in service since they've moved to a provincial-wide system, except at the beginning, there's a little hiccups along the way, but.
They've reported to us as council on that,
Yeah.
how much better it is.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
okay, just as long as we're not gonna get that.
Yeah. Anybody else? Moving on, community enforcement.
I think the main change here was, in 2020, we had a budgeted item for the school resource officer that was covered by grants. So really, we've just removed that for 2021, and that's why there's not really a lot of difference in the bottom lines there.
Any questions, comments, or concerns? Councillor Bevan?
Through the chair, community enforcement is, we have a reclassification of a CPO people in that. Can they not offset our RCMP, like being in town and doing the stop signs, distracted driving on your phones, seat belts, the whole works like that, and maybe even doing a little bit of photo radar in our school zones and stuff like that, where our RCMP can be out doing, again, on the highways or looking after the drugs or whatever now. That would bring a more money into our coffers too on that side. Would offset a lot of that.
Go ahead and see if
Thank
Eric
you through the chair. Yes, Councillor Bevan, it is our intention to take advantage of the requirement for community peace officers to be classified as, I can never keep it straight.
Level
one,
ones.
level 1, level 2. Always seems to me like the level 2 should be the higher classification, but anyway, which would allow them to engage in moving violations is the big one there. And we have recently outfitted and purchased 2 new vehicles to support our community peace officers, and they are both set up to engage in traffic enforcement as well. With COVID, there's been some delays on some of the training and those pieces, and so we have not yet had our 1 permanent officer classified, but we're still working on that. And I would suggest that up to and until council was to tell us that traffic enforcement was their kind of main objective or main goal, it would be kind of an ancillary piece to what they do, perhaps targeted programming or occasional issues. Certainly if they were out and about and saw a violation, they could do it. But there's a whole bunch of work that they are currently tasked with doing that would then have to be done by someone else or left undone if they were to spend a great amount of their time doing traffic enforcement. There is certainly the offset, as you described, of the potential for more revenue, which may be able to allow us to add more assets to the team or increase our overall ability to provide enforcement in the community. We do also like the idea of freeing the RCMP from some of those tasks that they're capable of doing it in terms of traffic enforcement, parking, et cetera, and allowing the RCMP to focus on the criminal investigations and other pieces that they have. So we're very, very aware of that and growing towards it.
Follow up?
Yeah, I do. Just as how other CPO ones they go to, and that we as council can let them know what we'd like them to focus on, but not take away from the other duties such as, you know, properties or whatever and stuff like this and that. So we didn't want them out down the highway, so say for example, doing photo radar, they wouldn't go out till we leave that to the RCMP. We just don't want to strictly do enforcement in town of, you know, the stop sign, and if we want them to do their other jobs. So I think it's council, we put something together that we would like them to add to it, but don't take away from you know, and a lot of times when a person sees the blue, the colored lights flashing on their vehicles, they smarten up right away pretty fast. And that, you know, they see the colored lights, they know that, hey, you know, now they can't get away with a lot of stuff in that. So I think education is a lot with it too.
Councillor Wilkinson.
To the chair. I thought the photo radar was contracted out to some group already. But of course, I'd like to see community safety in the school zones. You know, I don't think the RCMP has got enough time. And they are really dangerous zones and people need to be fined when they're covering the crosswalks, etc. Because they're just an accident waiting to happen.
So, and I think too, I think one of our challenges is in community enforcement, we're down to one officer right now active. We've talked 3 years now about having a third officer. We really lack capacity in this area. They get, what is their calls for service right now? 1,900 calls a year?
Through the chair to council, the 12 to 1,500 calls.
Yeah, so that's a lot for 1 or 1.5 people with vacation and everything. I think there's huge opportunity when you do have those red and blue flashing lights. That does a lot to prevent crime. The RCMP general duty officers don't spend a lot of time doing traffic in some of those smaller pieces. We're fortunate we do have a traffic unit here that does an exceptional job that we see the benefits of, that we don't pay for, but those are provincial resources. But they do spend a lot of time with, you know, impaired driving and that sort of thing. But I really feel that we need a third officer, whether that is just Edson based or cost sharing with one of our neighbors. I know Hinton struggles with the same thing, with not enough resources, and there might be some opportunities there to partner. But we're a growing community, and some of these traffic safety issues around pedestrians, around school zones in West Haven, it's chaos over there, and people are parking on crosswalks, and until people start getting tickets and have officers talking to them about these issues, it's just going to continue. So, and then we have to deal with the budgetary constraints that we face.
Thank you. Just for council's awareness, we do have a longer-term plan by attrition to add another position there that I anticipate in the next year or two. So there is a plan in place to add another resource there. It's just, like I said, by attrition. So.
Councillor Sorensen.
Yeah, through the chair to administration. I also was surprised that we're increasing the capacity or the capabilities of CPOs and CP1, I should say, and but we're reducing the fine revenue. So expected. Can you say why we're expecting less revenue this year?
We have less officers.
Oh, it's just the less officers.
I would defer to Mr. Lachur to comment on that.
So the fine revenue should not be decreasing.
Went from 33 down to 26.
So we've adjusted on historical trends.
So 33 was an overestimate.
Yes.
And now we have a more realistic estimate.
Yeah. And
we do expect more robust, through the chair, we do expect more robust revenue generation as we grow into that program. We just unfortunately still feel there's a little time before we'll fully realize that.
Go ahead,
Through the
Guy.
chair to council, if I can address the line you see for fines, for us is 5 or 6 lines of different fines. And so overall correction on some of the fines coming in based on historical trends, but an actual increase on our own CPOs issuing fines. There's actually an increase there, but the historical trend on some other layers of where fines come in for enforcement has been reduced to historical trends, so it turns into a net loss of fines.
And we're focused on education too, right? So, Councillor Bevan?
Through the chair, I'm not sure if you can tell me this, maybe Sergeant Delisle can tell us when we talk to him next, but there's a move on to have the Fish and Wildlife also join into their ranks or something like that. What is that about? What are they gonna do to help them out? Because I know they are kind of balking at it, saying that they're not gonna get a pay raise, so on and so forth.
Yeah, through the
How is
chair.
that gonna help out the police?
Through the chair to Councillor Bevan. A lot of that would be more impacted on the county, because they would be in the county. For us, we wouldn't see any substantial support in any way from Fish and Wildlife to our policing here in the community. I think that's going to have a bigger impact on the county and much more rural locations.
All right. Any other further on CPOs and community enforcement? Councillor Bevan?
Well, so if that's more of an impact on the county, is that gonna free up anybody from there to help us out? What do you guys think?
Can I respond? Not really.
Not
Not our area. And it's quite frankly, it's a mess.
It is.
It is, and that's not what Fish and Wildlife are trained to do. So, we get good coverage. Our officers are mostly in town. They don't respond to the county that often, and they're usually responding to calls of service. So, we actually see a lot more benefits from the provincial guys that are working in town here that we don't pay for. So, anything else on that? Okay, we'll move on. To parks.
With here that mostly the personnel shift that we talked about, but I just wanted to point out that we have added some cost there to fund the homeless out of the cold initiative for 2020. That included in the budget.
Yeah, your head up.
Through the chair, about with that budget for your personnel, does that include paying arena staff when they work in the parks in the summer?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Byer.
Through the chair to administration, so we're expecting then to have our full complement of summer students again. And I know the parks has quite a few of them there. Are we expecting any changes in service levels? I know some of them do different things that we cut out this year. What will that look like?
Through the chair to Councillor Byer, so service levels are anticipated to, on the grand scale, return, mirror 2019. I think the parks is a little bit of an exception. Council will remember earlier this year when there was a pilot program brought forward to council for consideration of an adjusted approach to parks maintenance by classifying and tiering the parks and trying to be more effective and more efficient in where our staff spend their time for maintaining of green spaces and trails, etc. And so overall, we anticipate that will enhance services by allowing parks to spend more time on more overall spaces, but in any particular area there may be minor fluctuations in service levels depending on the classification of a park.
I think that's
Yeah.
Anything else on parks? All right. Big budget item. Cemetery.
Really, the change here was just the switching of the personnel to the gross recovery and a slight increase of costs due to some training needed on there's cemeteries moved over to the guided tours area, so there's some training that's needed for their staff to learn how to use that cemetery system. Sorry.
Any questions, comments, or
Through the
concerns?
chair,
Councillor
whose
Wilkinson?
department was this under before?
It was actually within planning.
I've spoken before, it was Mr. Latour, I just think that gets to be such a huge portfolio. I mean, okay.
Thank
Not
you.
my call, but it is a huge portfolio.
Yeah. Previously, cemetery was actually more split between the two departments, where the operational element was in parks and the administrative element was in planning. That's just, doesn't make sense to have that split between two departments. It functioned obviously and we made it work, but it just makes so much more sense to have the administrative support already connected to the operational arm that operates the cemetery. There should be no functional service level changes. It should all continue to operate smoothly, but it does create some internal streamlining of some of those processes, and yeah, it's certainly, I think, a positive thing.
Councillor Shred?
Where it says personnel, I think we've changed it. It's not one full-time person now, it's in parks. Sometime you could send a whole crew in to cut grass, and so it's just your total hours from several people. 'Cause at one time we had one person virtually running it,
That's correct.
and now it's changed, it's just the total hours is spent. Okay, thank you.
Deadly, let's move on. FCSS.
I was gonna go with we beat that one to death. We didn't really, so I didn't feel like I should.
Yeah, it's gonna go on who's responsible for so much. It's like together.
Check us on the Comedy Channel tonight at 7.
Those viewers, they're dying.
I was gonna say the constable
They're
was watching,
dying.
he just turned it off. It's over.
Yeah.
Punch drunk.
FCSS.
Who's speaking on that?
So FCSS, you'll notice quite a difference between two bottom lines for the different budgets. The original 2020, we were still sort of in that transition period of the Parent Link grant versus a new grant, etc. I'm not really sure where we were. After we were more aware of that, when we know like the family centre closed, we had a full-time staff member leave from there. We also lost a little bit of revenue with that, obviously. The other thing is with the grants, there was a grant that was going to the Boys and Girls Club of 30,000, so that's been discontinued. But we have kept on one of the full-timers from the family centre, so that's helping to offset that salary for that personnel. Anything, I'll just like to hand that over to Mr. Latour if he's got anything else to.
We, through the chair to council, we also, we had the rental at the family center, and we've taken a large portion of that $24,000 rental money and put it over into Griffith Center for increased maintenance and cleaning and support in that new center. There was a reduction in this budget, but that moved over to increase in the Griffith Center portion.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Yeah, through the chair, that grants to individuals and organizations, is that the Edson Seniors Transportation Society?
Through the
No.
chair to council, no, that's not. There's another section with
Okay,
transportation.
thank you.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns? So I'm just trying to recall our conversation about that personnel that did move over. I thought we were only continuing that until the end of this year. Did we decide to do that longer? I can't recall the conversation.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. This budget proposal doesn't suggest that we would keep that position permanently. That's for council's consideration, obviously, and that's how the current budget is built.
Okay. So just further to that, I'm in support of that. I think we have huge gaps in this service, as the FCSS Advisory Board has discussed. I think it's that prevention piece is so critically important, which impacts our policing costs down the road and all the sorts of different issues that we face as a community. And I know that the staff there do wonderful jobs. So I think it's necessary from my point of view, but I just wanted to highlight that because I wasn't sure what the conversation was at the end. So go ahead, Councillor Sorensen.
Through the chair to council, I do, now I'm starting to recall that conversation. I remember you had severe concerns about taking on more provincial responsibilities with that position, so I think we need to talk about this more.
Any other comments, questions, or concerns? Mr. Latour?
Through the chair to council, just for some clarification. So when we lost the Parent Link funding, we had 2 staff, and so we've basically lost the funding for one person completely, and then partial for the other person. And then what we've done here to realign to keep that one person that we lost partial funding for is the Boys and Girls Grant that we had. We're using that money now to offset the funds and fees, or funds that we lost through the Parent Link for that person's roughly half their wages. So, yeah.
If I may add to that as well. I've spoke very strongly in the past about not carrying provincial responsibilities. That is not the intent of what we are suggesting here. We're suggesting that there is plenty of work within our own FCSS programming that is appropriate and needed in our community, and we feel that there is certainly a lot of programming elements and work that falls within the purview of our program as it is designed. Those are the things that this individual would be tasked with, not provincial programming through the new Family Resource Network. It's not an intent to try and shore up those responsibilities, just to add that clarity as well.
Mr. Latour and then Councillor Curry.
I think
Okay.
that's what Mike was saying.
Okay, Councillor Curry and then Councillor Sorensen.
So I just want to clarify to make sure I'm getting this right. This isn't actually an increase to the budget. This is moving around money that we had allocated to other areas to now cover that position. So we're not actually increasing our budget at all to cover this position.
Generally speaking, yes.
It's just moving around the budget.
Councillor Sorensen and Councillor Wilkinson.
To be clear, it is a municipal service improvement or increase then, is what you're suggesting. We're not taking over a provincial responsibility, we're actually improving municipal service.
That is how I would characterize it, yes.
So that would be in the growth column then, or?
Thank you. Perhaps it may have been worthwhile to characterize it that way, yes.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, did you not say that this person that we have half-time was partially funded by the grant that we had to the Boys and Girls Club?
Through the chair, that is how we're proposing funding, along with a few other, again, as Councillor Curry suggested, it's more of a reallocation of cost to fund the position, whereas before it was being allocated to things like the Boys and Girls grant or rent of the red brick and a few other cost reallocations to cover the cost of keeping that person on to assist with programming.
So I just want to follow up. So you're talking about the money that we as a town gave to the Boys and Girls Club, not any money that they had as a Boys and Girls
That's
Club?
correct.
Yeah.
All right.
That's
Thank
correct.
you for the clarification.
So basically, this is not going to cost us more because we were already providing those funds externally before. So, and I don't want to get into provincial responsibility, and I think what the government has done with the Family Resource Network is, I think the thinking behind it is well, but they haven't rolled it out appropriately, and they haven't looked at local situations, and the letter from the minister was disgusting. And she was supposed to meet with us, and she has yet to reschedule, so we'll be having a...
Shawnee?
Yes.
Minister Schwan.
So-
She didn't meet with us either when
Yeah.
we were scheduled to meet.
So I'll be discussing that with the MLA, but I'm happy with this plan that's put forth. Yeah, so thank you. Councillor Chenard?
Just one, actually quick question. Moving from the town office down to Boys and Girls Club, financially, it won't probably make a lot of difference.
Through the chair to Councillor Chenard, as I previously indicated, we will be moving some funds that we were using for the rental of the family center at the Red Brick to support the operations of Griffith Center. So there will be technically increased operational costs to running Griffith Center, but we are using funds we already currently had in the budget from the closure of the family center. So it's just shifting from one location to the other to support the operations of that thing. So it's not costing the town anything.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted that quick clarification.
All right. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Councillor Byer, I knew you were thinking.
You wait too long.
Time's
Through
up.
the,
Time's up. Move on.
through the chair to administration. So if we were paying the rent, we were paying the rental for the Parent Link to the Red Brick. I know we do offer them some granting as well on top of that. Are we expecting that level to remain the same as they indicated when they did a presentation a
So
while back?
through the chair, you'll see it does reflect in here the commitment we made of an adjusted grant amount to Red Brick that's independent of the rental arrangement. My understanding is that they've already successfully rented the space to another entity.
Oh, good. Okay.
And so I don't anticipate any additional interaction with the
Okay.
Red Brick on that.
And I think that when they presented to us, they're already factoring that
That's
into
correct.
that's why one of the reasons they asked for a little bit extra money as well.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sorensen?
Through the chair to council, I just think we need to be very careful while making programming this coming year that we don't get into the provincial responsibilities. It's so tempting because it's a obvious gap, but we just got to make sure we don't.
Councillor Latour.
Council.
Mr. Latour.
Yeah, through the chair to council and Councilor Sorensen. The responsibilities that we carried through Parent Link still are within the criteria of FCSS. So FCSS is very preventative, and they're not completely separate, that the services we provided at Parent Link aren't separate from FCSS. They still follow under that. We would still be providing a very minimal level of programming like we were over at the center, but it's not anywhere near what the level that was funded under Parent Link. I just want to make very clear that there will be some services that will look the same. It will be minimal compared to Parent Link, but those absolutely fall within the criteria of the FCSS profile and what they ask us to do with their funds.
All right. Thank you very much. Parent Link, nothing to see. We know
Nothing
that.
really to see, just that it's now removed.
Public transportation, that's seniors transportation. And for
Maintenance of the existing grant programs
Yeah.
have been in place.
That's it.
community, unless anybody has anything, we'll move on to community services admin. Those are pretty self-explanatory.
Just wondering which, sorry.
Community services admin?
Okay, right, sorry, I'll be passing. Here, really not a lot changed. There was just a slight change in how I had to handle the youth council bursary and set it up as a liability instead of a reserve. That's all, just an accounting thing. That was really the only change of any significance for community services.
All right. Any questions? Hearing none. Oh, Counselor Curry.
You gotta be quicker.
Just, through the chair, was that just where the difference with that grants to individuals and organizations, that extra 6,000?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, community development.
With this one, there was just some minor reallocations between different accounts. Bottom line did not really change significantly.
Okay, any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, we're gonna move on to Griffiths Park.
So this was what we were talking about, the change over from, to refurbish it to be used for our CD team. As you can see, when Boys and Girls Club were in there, we had a bottom line of around 16,000, estimated to now be about 20. So there's a slight increase there for the usage of that building for our community development team, but not really a huge increase.
I would also maybe note here that you probably won't see it reported this way next year, as the community development section and the Griffiths Park session will be combined. We're just only, just moving into that process and make sure we account for it appropriately, and then it would, in future years, that would just show underneath community development.
And building maintenance.
That's right.
Counselor Curry.
Can you just remind me, sorry, I'm trying to look at here, what was our rent at the parent lane?
22.
24,000.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Yep.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Repsol Place.
Here you can see we have some decreases in the revenues due to operating under COVID. So you can see those reflected in the revenue section there. The rest below is just really some minor allocations, as well as of course the personnel changes, allocation changes that we've mentioned numerous times. So any questions on that?
Counselor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, to Mr. Latour, do you see any uptake in the usage of the pool area of Repsol Place?
Through the chair to Council and Council Wilkinson. When we reopened, it was very slow. It was very slow.
Very so, right.
But in the last week or two, since the weather started shifting, we have at the pool seen some increase in people coming in and using it more. And the arenas are right now packed, and we anticipate
Very well booked.
Yeah.
Is the language that we want to use there.
Very well.
We anticipate the intention of the user groups to use as much time as they can is happening.
Good.
So we anticipate that it'll continue to work well on the arena side. The big impact is again on the aquatics and pool side, where social distancing really massively decreases our capacity to do that, though. That all being said, our new staffing model being very efficient and lean to only demand is had a huge impact, and I'm hoping, depending, it's so hard to tell with COVID what it'll look like next year, but we've seen some real efficiencies with the staffing when we really looked at it hard due to COVID. And because we can actually control how many people are showing up, we can staff based on only a certain amount coming in and not being prepared for extra. So it's had some weird benefits, and then we might want to look long term at how we could utilize some of the things we're doing during COVID to allow us to operate a much more efficient system at the Aquaplex.
Thank you for evolving through that. Like, it has been a struggle for sure.
Yeah.
Will continue to, I think.
kudos to you and your staff
Mhm.
managing all of that. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
A blank check isn't that big after all.
All right, well, that was easy.
Yes, it's amazing.
Culture.
Sure.
Really, there was just a slight increase to the museums, which was for the year, and you can also see the $3,000 under the non-COVID was the increase to the eco grant when they came to increase there earlier in the year. That's really the main things within culture.
Questions, comments, or concerns? All right.
Going once.
Thank you, Mr. Latour. So what's our tax increase gonna be, 3.5?
Thank you.
Or you wanna have a look at the operational reserves, I imagine?
Yeah, we can take a really quick look at those. Again, this is more of a reflection of if this budget was to be passed. This is the opening and closing balances as of 2021 as we know them now. And so more informational, I think, than anything at this point. And you can see that there is I think a net increase of $250,000 overall in our operating reserves as a result of the budget. And then if there's no questions, or I know, Sarah, I don't suppose you, unless there's questions, I don't think you have any comments on the operational reserves?
No.
Yeah, then we just need to kind of hash out some final pieces of direction. I don't know, maybe if you want to take 5 minutes or you just want to jump into it?
Let's
or-
just jump into it
Okay.
so we can get done and.
Thank you.
be
So I have a
online.
few pieces of information to kind of reflect back to council, and then we'll work to encapsulate your feedback into what the future iterations of the budget proposal will look like. So currently, with everything included, basically including the budget software, the tax increase is 3.73. If we were to remove that, it's the 3.5 ish there. So a couple of items that were mentioned throughout the conversation today that were we talked a lot about the potential for a storm sewer utility charge. For council's information, for each $1 you were to place on the utility bill to address stormwater, it would generate $35,000. So a $2 stormwater utility charge would generate approximately $70,000.
A year or a month?
That's a year.
A year,
That's annual.
okay.
Yeah. We also have mentioned there seemed to be some support for some concern with road maintenance and the resources available to that. Just very, very high level or preliminary, one way we may be able to consider two birds with one stone is if council was to allocate $2 for a stormwater management utility fee and generate $70,000, that $70,000 could be applied to the roads budget where they currently undertake stormwater maintenance, which would then enhance their ability to address some of the maintenance issues that council identified. And so that would be kind of a covering of that increase in services there. I would suggest that we are in the process of doing a better job of understanding what the true costs of operating our stormwater system are, and that will have to evolve over time because we haven't traditionally separated that out as an individual expense. We intend to do that in the future, but over time we can then consider that $2 covering some of the operational expense and then adding additional fees at appropriate times to begin addressing capital expenditures as well as a long-term plan. So that was a concept I wanted to suggest to council. The other concept that came to mind is, as I reflected on some of the conversation that took place today, is we currently have that $50,000 in the disaster portion of the budget to deal with ongoing COVID costs. But we also still have access to the COVID reserve. Sarah, current expected?
Around 740,000.
So, the suggestion there being that we probably don't need to have that $50,000 on an ongoing basis when we have already generated a significant reserve amount that I think we would be prepared to access should we have need of it in an operational sense. And then council would have the opportunity to reallocate that $50,000, which is roughly 0.5% taxation, either against that long-term effort that reducing those reliance on those other revenue streams, maybe one way to allocate that, or other two other priorities that council may have. So I just wanted to reflect those pieces back and then allow council to discuss. As always, what we ultimately need is a pretty firm direction on the overall outcome that council would like to see, and then we can move around a few of the chess pieces to come back with a council on a recommendation of how we might achieve that. Sarah, anything to add before we kind of turn it over to council to discuss?
I think so. Do we just reiterate the amounts we're talking about is from the original budget? From the emergency budget is sitting at 18%.
Through the chair,
Councillor Wilkinson.
one of the chess pieces to me is what percentage of increase is management tentatively thinking of this year, especially with the provincial government taking a 7% decrease. I think this is an important thing for our taxpayers and for us to know in our budget.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, I think as Councillor Sorensen suggested after doing the math there, that amount is pretty close to in line with what the union negotiated increase
But the union
is.
has already taken 0 for 2 other years where management hasn't, so I just thought overall in the span of, say, a 5-year term.
Thank you. Through the chair, yeah, when we do the math on the reason the union ended up taking 0 is because over the previous 5 years, they had overshot inflation
Right.
significantly, so that
But
is
they
that is completely independent of how much management has been or should be
Well, you were
compensated.
comparing, that's the only reason I brought that up.
So,
Any other questions, comments, or concerns?
We're just gonna dive into it.
Yeah, dive into it, Councillor Sorensen.
Yeah, like I said, before, I would like to see a proposal for a stormwater fee, as well as potentially standardizing the water and sewer rates, if with a neutral impact on our taxpayer, on a residential taxpayer. And I do think this is a perfectly fine year to do it, as long as it was revenue neutral on the taxpayer. I think we should try to get things done. I don't want to wait anymore. I do think if there are grants specifically for COVID, like the MOST grant, was it? Maybe that should be used for PPE. So doesn't that sound like it was designed for PPE?
certainly through the chair, yes, that is the general of nature of that. That's definitely
And
an option. But
finally, our operational reserves are going up by 240K. That's 2% that we could be using to reduce our tax burden. So I think we don't necessarily need to increase our operational reserves by that much, and maybe lower some of this tax increase slightly.
Right, any other questions, comments,
just,
or?
sorry,
oh,
Mayor,
go
just
ahead.
before you move on to that, I just want to point out that the vast majority of that is the Fortis franchise fee, which is, it's currently categorized as an operational reserve, but is typically used more as a capital reserve. And so if you were to remove the Fortis franchise fee from the equation, capital or operational reserves are actually going down by about $100,000 without that franchise fee in consideration.
Councillor Shenard?
Just to get a clarification of Councillor Sorensen, if we add something, we can't be capital neutral. No matter what we add, we pay. But, I mean, it's your thought, but I'm just correcting on it, that you can't add and have like that. But what I would like to look at is, we mentioned we have 750,000 left from our COVID reserves. And I think we talked about it, this could roll into 2021. I'm not against the tax increase. We have to put some kind of increase. But since we're talking about it, we could maybe factor in, if we're looking at 3.5, possibly 4, depending, in there, I would like to see a 1.9 or something, not like last year, because we warned people last year, we're giving you a cut, you have to pay for it. But if we can comfort them into 2021, because it's gonna be several years of people recovering, and even a 1% tax increase sounds horrible, but it just makes the people feel more comfortable that we didn't nail them with a 3.5. So that's just my comment on there. We're just figuring out the budgets, but we can maybe keep that in mind. Some of the things we have to pay, like there was that one figure carried over, 235,000, that was extra money regardless of COVID hit or not. Some of that money, maybe we could absorb some of that out of the 750. It's just kind of a thought that 3.5 ain't horrible, but it sounds better if we can go 1.9 and use some of our COVID money. It would help ease a lot of the people going through the struggles into 2021, because now, as our world changed, even if the kids
Okay, thank you.
January
Thank you. We got the point, Councillor
You got the
Shenard.
point? 1.9.
All right. Councillor Byer.
Okay, so through the chair to council and administration, I also echo what Councillor Sorensen mentioned about putting that stormwater management on the utility bill. I think that's something that our public needs to have a conversation, that we need to have those conversations and communication pieces about that. And I think putting that $2 on their bill and taking it from the taxes, so we are revenue neutral on that, just like we did with the recycling. I think it kind of opens the eyes to that there is a fee for managing a stormwater system. It doesn't come for free, and $2, isn't maybe gonna encompass it all, but it's a start.
All right. Any other comments, questions, or concerns?
You want me to talk to all
No,
three?
no, I do not. Councillor Curry.
I would just echo what Councillor Sorensen, Councillor Byer said. I would like to see us start to move stormwater over to our utility. And I do think that $2 amount is a good starting price. And slowly move. So that is like most utilities on the utility fund.
Councillor Bevan.
I just like to echo the same thing, I agree with the council here, that we move forward to it.
All right, I'll jump in here. I agree that we should be moving that from taxation into utilities. Once again, I always say this because we were able to hit everybody that are currently not paying taxes but utilizing those services and putting those pressure on those infrastructures, but it has to be coming off the taxation side and moving that forward. I think that worked really well with recycling. I do think that we should be using some of our COVID reserve to help buffer our residents. I know that people are still struggling, and I think we're probably going to see huger struggles with various subsidy programs that are ending. We don't know how long this is going to last for. I think we did make a mistake last year that we just lowered taxes. We should have kept taxes what they were going to be and showed a rebate on their tax bill. I think that would have been, at least they would be able to see what their taxes were supposed to be, because now they're going to be doing the comparison and thinking that there's going to be that big increase, when in actual fact it was more just a rebate, a one-time thing. I think if we do something like that this year, once again, we could go with the 3.73, but then show it as a rebate, pulling some money out of a COVID reserve, much like we did with the utilities. I don't know how that works with your taxation pieces, but I think we need to, because it's not just the tax side. We're looking at a $5.75 plus $2, so it'd be $7.75 increase on average per residential consumer on their utility bills. So we need to offset that on the taxation side a little bit, I think. But go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. So I think we've heard a general consensus that consideration of a stormwater fee, $2, about $70,000, but that would correspond in a revenue neutral sense in terms of taxation.
Yeah.
seems to be the general feedback. Okay, very good. The other is now a conversation about buffering the tax increase there. I'll just make a few general comments, and then we have some refresh pieces from when we talked about this in the spring. It's just a reminder that any amount of money we put into that this year, we have to find it in future years. And so it's just kicking that can to the next year and the next year and the next year and the next year. And that whatever plan we make, I'm certainly supportive of the concept and idea. We just have to make sure that we're prepared to, with the implications that come along with it and how it may impact future budgets. So I think we've brought back a few of the pieces from when we initially presented this to council, and so you can see where we've talked about this, where if we go down this year and then go all the way back up, that's what this current budget reflects right now, is we basically get in there, and truthfully, I think we have to say we're still using approximately $200,000 already of the most grant to buffer that, just to accomplish this, as it is here. And so then if we show the other option, you can see now if you stretch that out over a long period of time, how that kind of changes the long-term implications that come along with that. And you have to basically make a long-term commitment to use of the COVID reserve and or the most grant to cover that space over time, to ensure that service levels don't begin to suffer and you don't undermine the kind of long-term integrity of the program. It can be done. It just again, want to make sure we're considerate of those implications.
Could you flip it back? I'm sorry, just so I can, okay, thank you. Thank you, Mike, go ahead.
So that yellow line, that's what it is currently set up for?
Yes, the yellow line up to the green, that would be the 10% increase to get us right back to normal, sort of back online as of 2021. The other one extends that out a little bit longer.
One thing I will say is that this considers an inflationary rate of 2.75, where we already know the inflationary rate is lower now and anticipated to be a little bit lower, and so just maybe a % wiggle room in terms of the inflationary rate there. So if we go to the long one, Mike, maybe you can just kind of describe what this looks like in terms of budgetary implications.
It's just using more of something to subsidize it, whether it's the most grant, whether it's the COVID relief, whether it's whatever it ends up being. But it's just spreading it out over a year, less each year, but having to make that difference up over the years. So there will always be a year of a jump. Like even on this one, you see from 2020 to 2021, there's still a jump. There will always have to be a jump here. But on this one, it just takes longer. It gets there, but it takes longer, and that opens up unknowns.
Yeah. Both ways,
Questions, comments, concerns? Councillor Curry?
I think just my overall comment to council is knowing this, and knowing that we still have that 200,000 from the most. I'm not willing to go too low. I'm not I know that yes, that is that 10, but it's not really a 10. As a homeowner, I don't see it as a 10. I see it as the 3.73. I was fully aware that this year's taxes was a pandemic tax. To me, that was a fully aware, fully communicated. But I just knowing that we are talking about 200,000 in that budget that we still have to make up next year, I'm not too comfortable going too far into that COVID relief. Because the reality is we're probably going to have to take that 200,000 possibly from the COVID relief next year. So if we drop that down 200, and we already know some of that's spoken for, and that's assuming that we have no other pandemic issues to come yet, that relief gets small real fast if we're taking 400,000 out in the next 2 years.
Go ahead.
Just to keep in mind as well, the $50,000 COVID response, council's comfortable considering removing that and relying on the already existing reserve. That's approximately 0.5% there. That's an adjustment we can make right now, sorry,
Question to you, remove it or fund it, so that it becomes revenue neutral, so the 50 stays in?
I think it's the same.
The same? Okay.
We need
It's
PPE.
not to me.
Yeah.
Do not order any PPE.
And we haven't
No,
addressed
it's
it.
not a programmed expense,
No, I
so
don't-
we
I
wouldn't
know.
know what we were spending on it right now anyway, and anything that would emerge, we could come forward and ask for access to that. That's all that it means, is that we would just have to come and ask for access to the reserve. So if we fund it, I have no problem with that, but
My thought is I was not expecting the most money, so that is a large amount of funding that I expected to use for COVID-19 reserve. We made some very significant decisions that impacted a lot of people within our organization this year, with the understanding that we didn't know what was going to happen, and that it was supposed to be for a long-term thing. And I would hate to see us just having a pot of money sitting there not being used. We need it working to benefit our taxpayers one way or the other. And that's a lot of money to have sitting on the side. We've already committed some funds which have already been dispersed to Community Futures West Yellowhead. So I'm not saying use it all, but I see using a portion of that just to help a little bit to stretch that out. And people are feeling pain, and we need to look at that or talk about service level reductions. But I anticipate that what we've gone through this year, I get the feeling from the community that they don't like service level reductions. So we have to deal with all of that. So go ahead.
through the mayor, I think we certainly, administratively, the most money is extra, additional gravy, money that we weren't anticipating having to work with. If council was to want to have a plan to buffer taxes over a period of time, that may be the money I would suggest be applied. And we can, we're already applying $200,000 of that basically. So that can go up. And then also applying those additional years. So if we were to, apply another $100,000, approximately another percentage of taxation to that this year, that would then leave us with about $550,000. And then if that was to be applied over the next couple of years to deal with that, that's possible. I just want to reiterate that is a difficult thing to do in each year, to remove those pieces, but I think that's one potential path. I'm just kind of off the head. I don't know, Sarah or Mike, if you have anything to add to that concept.
No, I think that's, there'll always need to be the makeup if we use those things to offset taxes.
Councillor Chenard?
Just my comment, so our proposed budget coming up, the 2021, is that's putting us back at full staff, bringing stuff back to 2019 standards.
That's correct.
So then we're all talking about COVID, and I don't want it to happen, but what if this boils over 2021 and 2021 looks just like 2020, which I never want to happen, but that could happen. So then we would carry on with what we're doing in 2020 with the COVID cutbacks, staffing, and cutting out services. So that may change what we're doing as well too.
Councillor
To
Wilkinson?
the chair, I thought at one time that we made a commitment that we were doing this, but we wouldn't be doing it past December 31st.
That's
Staff
correct.
cutbacks.
That's correct.
That's what I understood.
Right.
So it may be decreased staff, period, if we come into another big pandemic.
Right.
It would be decreased staffing more than the staffing hours.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And I think through Mr. Chair, through yourself to Councillor Chenard's point, that was, I think, the driver behind the way we approached our organizational adjustments, was to create flexibility to deal with continued struggles into 2021. So with the most grant and with the COVID reserve, we have over $1 million of money that can protect the organization should 2021 also prove to be a very difficult year. And so I think that we have put ourselves in a position where we can consider budgeting relatively normally, knowing that we still have that safety net as we move forward into 2021. I don't want to be too, trite with it. The question is, do we want to rip the Band-Aid off and feel the recovery pain kind of now, or do we want to stretch that out over a period of time? But the pain will
It's coming.
be there if we want to return to 2019 service levels. That we're operating under that premise, and at this point I haven't heard anything to suggest that that we want to go consider anything different than that at this stage.
Counselor Byer, I almost called you Counselor Curry.
Through the chair to council and administration. I also kind of side with Councillor Curry on this. I know when we first had these discussions in my mind, I thought, okay, this is great. We can do this over, a 5-year period or whatever that looks like. And now that we're into the pandemic and we don't see an ending to it in the near short-term future, to any of our knowledge, that using this as a buffer, I feel is a bit comforting going into the next year, not knowing what the next 12 months look like, as well as if we were going to extend it to not rip that Band-Aid off right away, I would only be comfortable with like a maximum of like a 2-year period of doing that, mainly because this time next year we don't know who's going to be sitting at this table, and they whoever will be here next year won't have maybe the preliminary discussions that we have had about this and why we did that, and what that kind of our target was, and reasoning behind it. So I don't feel that that's right to put the next term's council into a position where they have to make up for maybe the decisions that we were not having the courage or ability to make. And even if we pass the budget in December with maybe ripping the Band-Aid off a little faster, if something happens between now and May, then I believe we still have the ability to make those adjustments before the tax notices go out in the spring.
Counselor Sorensen.
Through the chair to council, I'm not sure if I'm agreeing with you guys or not, so I'll just say what I think. I would be okay spending $100 grand from reserves, either COVID or most, to soften the tax impacts this year. I think that's what we're kind of talking about. Mainly because I agree with the mayor. I don't think we should just be sitting on money year after year without a plan, and we haven't come up with a big idea for what to do with the COVID money yet, and people are suffering now. So even if we could reduce taxes by 1%, that in itself is help to our taxpayers. So grant funding for the PPE and maybe $100 grand from reserves to reduce tax impacts, and a $2 stormwater fee transferring from taxes to utilities could make a huge difference this year.
Right. Well, since we're going around, let's Councilor Wilkinson.
Oh, I don't know, we're very torn on this. People really are suffering. Like, I know that, yes, we should put our taxes aside as we possibly can, get over this as quickly as possible to pull off that Band-Aid. But I'm more of it, at least give it 2 years to just slowly pull the Band-Aid off so it hurts just a little bit less, I think. And use some of the money from the reserve. I certainly don't want all of the COVID money used because we're not out of this yet. Yeah, it's just, well, it's a very difficult question because we do represent people who really are not doing well.
Mayor, if I just may ask or request that the council attempt to articulate that in a percentage tax increase they're comfortable with, obviously considering all these variables, that would just be very helpful for us moving forward. So for example, Councillor Sorensen suggested a 1% or 100,000 plus the 50,000, so that's something like a 2.2% tax. That's what it would end up being.
Plus the stormwater.
Yeah, plus the stormwater piece, but that would just be helpful for us moving forward.
All right. What's your tax increase number from the original 2020 budget to
And then we
2021.
can, and then administration can come forward with strategies to meet your
No,
objectives.
that's an excellent way of doing it. So Councillor Byer, we'll start with you.
Do I have to start first?
Yes, you do.
Um, if we don't consider COVID at all, I don't think that 3.73 is unreasonable, at all. You know, if we completely skip COVID out of the way. And that's a 10% if we go straight there, right?
I wish we had been smart enough to do the rebate. That's a really good idea now, Mayor.
I know.
Where were you 6 months
Where were
ago?
you?
No, you know where that came from? Actually, it came from the city of Brooks.
Uh,
And I'm like, why didn't we do it that way? Because that would have been a lot easier to articulate to the public.
Because now they say we've done nothing with it.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing.
Can I
Yeah.
just make a
Go
comment
ahead.
on that? We should definitely, maybe if you can't put it on the tax notice, include something in the envelope that says, here's where we were in 2000, with our first 2020 budget, and here where we are now. It's only actually gone up X%.
You're still
Go
on.
ahead.
Through the chair to administration, is there a way to put on the 2021 tax notice, you know, maybe not call it a rebate, but a COVID relief or something? Is there a way to add another line in the tax notice to articulate it at least this year? That way, when we have the tax increase, it's
there's- I'm
communicated
sure
a
that,
bit
yes, I'm sure that's
easier?
possible, but I would only say we would do that if we were actually rebating their taxes.
But relieving, COVID relieving the taxes?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So you're at
So your
It's too late
percentage?
to communicate that rebate now. We're talking about budget right now.
Yeah.
Like,
You
we're planning
still
on
could
putting
put
out
it-
budget communication.
Yeah.
It's not too late to
Yeah.
Yeah.
have that
Yeah.
communication out there about your last
Yeah,
rebate.
so coming out of this meeting, obviously, we will be communicating what the proposed budget looks like to the public. One of the main elements we'll be focusing on is obviously the 2019 to 2020 to 2020 emergency to 2021, and trying to do our best to ensure that people are as aware as possible as to that process.
Mhm.
So you're gonna put it out there and it's gonna see 10, it's gonna stuck in all their minds.
That's not-
But no, I like what you're, oh, actually. it's
So
my turn.
Councillor Byer.
I don't know.
Just say you agree with me. So easy.
I
Would you like me to give my opinion and then you
Yeah.
guys can?
I would also
then-
suggest, please keep in mind that this is not we're not asking you
Yeah.
to make a final decision today, so this is not being chiseled in
Nice to
stone or
come
written in blood.
Okay,
or-
Mr. Mayor.
Okay,
go first.
so I'll throw this out there and then you can all blame me in the media. I think that so 3.73, we removed the PPE stuff. That brings it down to
Approximately
3 and a quarter.
3.2, 3.25.
3.25, so I would say, and that's no additional money for transportation at this point in time, right?
That's correct.
So I would say to you, I would actually say let's keep it at 3.73. You do whatever you have to do with the PPE, and then we rebate 150,000, 1.5%. So that would bring it down to just over around 2.5.
Thank you.
So back over there again, help her out.
You said 2.5.
We'll go with Councillor Bevan.
Okay, let's go that way, this guy's kind of happening.
Yeah, no, I was just writing the same thing with Councilor Byer, kind of trying to figure things out. But I guess when I come to the figures, that's right around 2.5%, so 2.55, something there.
Councillor Curry.
Yeah, and I've tried really hard, minus 1 year, to make my decisions based on the CPI, and knowing that we do have to think about that in our tax percentages, but knowing things are a little bit different right now, we do need to make up for what we didn't do last year with that. So 2.33 was CPI right now, so I would be comfortable with that 2.5. I was just doing that math, and that's roughly 150, taking 150 is roughly right around that one. My fast math, my no mic math, but around that 2.5. So I would be comfortable with that, knowing 2.33 is about our inflation. We're getting a little bit, and with the hopes of knowing we have to make that a little bit more constant.
Councillor Sherrard?
What if I'm not ready? Okay, I'm gonna go with, I'm gonna 50% agree with Councillor
Oh,
Sorensen.
God.
I'll go to the 1.9 and then yes, move your damn $2 over. So there. Your $2 for your storm sewer you're fighting for?
So your taxation rate 1.9.
1.9 and then move to $2, so I 50% agreed with you.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Okay, I'm between 2.5 and 2.73. In that range.
$2.
Call 2.6.
2.61?
Councillor Sorensen?
Yeah, I'm fine. I think basically what you and I were saying the same thing. I was saying a tax
Yeah.
reduction, and you were saying let's keep it at the same, but do a rebate. That's fine.
Councillor Byer?
So, Mayor Zahara, you're saying, with your suggestion, it would be taking it over a 2-year period to get it back up to the same levels? Is that how it would work?
Yeah, we just don't know what the next year is gonna be, right? So, I think that, stretching out an extra year, and keeping in mind we have that COVID reserve, and as we make decisions with that reserve, leaving a little bit in there to give the council of the day that decision making, I think would be appropriate. I think we ended up with more money than we expected to help with COVID, so, we should be trying to do what we can to help right now, with what's going on. At the end of the day, $150,000 rebate on taxes, probably not going to amount to much for an individual household, but at least it's something. So, and that's what we always have to keep in mind at this table, because that's who we're here to represent. So, and we also have the utility increase too, which I'm concerned about because all those things have significant impacts.
Yeah. So I'm, as I mentioned before, the 2 years would be the max I would want to go with, extending that out because, the municipal price index catches up to us pretty quickly with that. And we don't know who's going to be around the table next year, and the next term making those decisions as well. And I think I could be comfortable with that.
And then and the thing with the rebate is that tax increase is already there, so it just
Yeah.
that rebate won't be there the next year.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Just gonna clarify my 1.9, where I agreed with you, when you take the 70,000, that puts it at 2.3. So I figured that 1.9 plus the $2 moved over is 2.3, and I agree with your rebate. So with the rebate going in, as long as it's in that 2, but if we're adding the $2 a house, then we need to be there, and we can remind the people of that, because we did move over 70,000, so that's like 0.4 of a tax, or actually 3.9, or Mike have to help me out with the math, but if you put it in there, then you're factoring it over. So that way when the public goes, hey, you keep adding this, this, and this up at the end of the day, because they all got pissed off when we moved it over, and you try to explain it to them, it's on your tax bill or on your utility bill, at least you can explain that. I did move it over to savings.
So I'm hearing general support for a targeted 2.5%.
Approximately, yeah.
Yeah.
As council, so that would allow us as we come out of this, not only to build some strategies to achieve that, but also to begin the messaging piece of this to the public, where we could go forward and say that the budget proposal is currently targeting this. Again, not married to that. That decision doesn't have to be made until the budget's actually passed in December. But part of that is we want to communicate that publicly so we can also receive feedback and learn how the public perceives that as well. Steve, do you have anything to add to that, or anything you would want or need communication-wise?
No, I don't think so. I think coming out of this meeting, we usually do a budget workshop recap. So we sort of encapsulate what we've discussed today, and just touching on prior, when we did do our emergency budget, we did do the comparisons. We did have the 2019, 2020 original, and 2020 actual. So we had those numbers in there, and we've been, it's something we can continue to do as well.
Perfect.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, when we're announcing what their taxes are going to be, is there any chance that we can announce that we're back, like, to a full .9 service with the office being open regular hours? and being just shut for one.
1.0?
Friday, 0.9, sorry. what was I
1.0
doing?
1.0
for January?
No, that's January, I'm saying right now, for the end of October, November, December, could we have the office open to the regular hours, and could we have it open everything except the one Friday when they're off?
You even confused me, Janet, what do you
Well,
mean?
the office is shut now here, two Fridays in a month.
Right, but that's at .9.
No,
or-
0.9 is every second Friday, it's one Friday out of 10 days,
No.
not 2 Fridays out of 10
No.
days.
So just to clarify
Yeah.
here, the office is currently only open Monday to Thursday.
Right.
And we do work on the two
You do work, but
alternating
it's not open
Fridays,
to the
but
public.
the office is open. Take meetings or take appointments as necessary. And we certainly, I don't know, Sarah may be able to comment on this. I have not received any significant feedback or issues or concerns at all from patrons of the office.
Okay,
in
I
any-
have, of people
in
coming
any way,
and
but-
it's been shut, like not, it's been shut early in the day and then on the other Friday. And I have received from quite a few people, I've received, they're just wondering why that's happening. So I just think it would be a great announcement if we could go back to the regular hours that we have had, except for the Friday, until.
Starting when?
Starting now, like when this announcement goes out about, oh, this is gonna be your taxes next year, we can also say, this is your service we're offering you now.
Perhaps what I would suggest for that is, because I do think there are a few other additional elements to that are more longer term or bigger picture, that we would administratively like to have a conversation with council. Perhaps we can bring that forward to a committee meeting here and
Okay, please do.
present a few of those ideas for
Yeah,
council's
please do.
consideration. The very, I mean, well, we'll save that for that
Okay.
conversation. But.
Well, considering that the Provincial Government Children's Services Office still remains closed 100% of the time,
That's not acceptable.
is not acceptable, and federal offices and all these offices are remaining closed while we have been operating for months. This council has been meeting in this room for months safely, while others have been hiding. Maybe I shouldn't say that out loud publicly. I don't really have a concern with how things are operating for the rest of this year, because I think we've gone way above and beyond. That's just my opinion. And I haven't heard any concerns. Actually, I wasn't even aware of it until you mentioned it a couple weeks ago, so.
The Friday.
But anyway.
We continue to not be overwhelmed with people coming to visit us on a daily basis. It's not a huge part of our service delivery, the foot traffic or the storefront or the retail part. Certainly we feel very, very, very comfortable that we are completely accessible to anyone who wants to do business with us.
Councillor Bernard?
Actually, saying that publicly is a fair comment, because over and over again, where you read on Facebook, like, all these people, they've been closed, not doing anything, and you just say that, no, we have operated at a scale back, because there's too many offices right now that are not operating, and things have
Those
not.
storefronts are.
No,
full-time.
but I mean, some of the
There's
people
two
that they're
things.
complaining about, they're still got their full salary, and they are not operating, point blank. Like, there's many offices, you try and phone, and you just don't get a response. They're not allowed to talk on the phone. You send them an email, no, I can't talk to you. So we need to compliment our town staff, council, that through this whole thing, we did operate. We didn't operate at a full capacity, meaning that we could meet and greet, meet on a regular basis, but this town operated, council operated, so we can be proud of that fact when they attack you and say, what did you guys do for your money? Well, we did the best we could, but we did not stop operating. We scaled back, so it's something to be proud of, all of us, so. Yes, you can make that thing openly.
Councillor Bernard?
Through the chair to administration, through this general conversation here about the budget, what have you guys, what have you heard?
2.5% target for tax increase. I want to express my appreciation to council. You've been earnest and engaged and given, I think, really, really quality feedback, and listened to the proposals that we had prepared for you, and I feel very satisfied with the conversation, that this will help to refine the budget in a way that it will do a great service to the taxpayers of this community.
Counselor Bevan?
Through the chair, I'd just like to say, this 2.5, I've liked it here, and I'm doing all my scribbling here. And I know a lot of people have talked to me, and they thought that we were gonna come in around the 7 or 8% for sure. And
That's the
I kept assuring them, I said, no, we would get it down to as low as we possibly could. And I think there's gonna be a lot.
Just to add to that, I think, be careful to, if they're referring specifically to what they paid last year,
Yeah.
then they will be correct, that it will be
No,
about a
that's
7 or an
exactly.
8%.
I explained to them what it was, so they will.
And we will
be at some
communicate,
ease.
we'll communicate that so that people are aware.
Exactly.
All right, good job, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, staff, for coming in on Saturday. We really, really appreciate it. And on that note, we are adjourned.
And there's still pizza and pop and